Welcome to Simply Sustainability. In this episode, we're talking with Diana Moanga, who is a lecturer and the manager of the Spatial Analysis Center at the Stanford Doerr School of Sustainability. She teaches multiple courses on GIS and remote sensing, and she was recently honored with the Stanford Doerr School of Sustainability's 2025 Excellence in Teaching Award for her commitment to teaching, learning, and her students' growth. Today, we're diving into the powerful and effective use of GIS and exploring how mapping tools are shaping everything from cities to climate and transportation to supply chains. Let's dive into the conversation. Hi, Diana. It's very nice to meet you, and thank you for being a guest on our interview series here at the Simply Sustainability podcast. So let's get started. Firstly, congratulations on your Excellence in Teaching Award. What does this recognition mean to you, and how has teaching shaped your journey at Stanford so far?
Hi, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. I'm very, very thankful to have gotten the Excellence in Teaching Award. It's been a great honor to get the award. Honestly, I really love teaching. I really love thinking about creative ways to make lectures fun and interesting and to showcase information in different meaningful ways. I also really enjoy like spatial data science, GIS, and remote sensing. And I kind of want to show people how many things you can do with this type of, spatial approach. And I want to kind of like, engage as many people as possible in effective science communication. So I really love teaching. I've taught a number of different classes in the past, and I really am very thankful of the opportunity to continue teaching in the future at Stanford. And working with students here has been incredibly inspiring too. I got to work with very, very smart, talented, hardworking, and motivated people, which also kind of has, helped me even get more excited to like come up with creative labs or like interactive lectures or different types of like teaching tools to disseminate knowledge in different ways that people can interact with and assimilate and understand and make it fun.
Wow, that's so inspiring. So, you completed your PhD at UC Berkeley before coming to Stanford as a postdoc, and now you're managing the Spatial Analysis Center at the Stanford Doerr School of Sustainability and teaching multiple GIS courses. So, what is the Spatial Analysis Center, and how does it support students and faculty who use geospatial tools in their research?
Yeah, so it's a great resource. I got to work on an array of different projects, different topics. It was really, really great to kind of like do anything from like deforestation and forestry to like wildfires and agriculture and working with different data sets. So the Spatial Analysis Center is a resource in which people can come with a variety of different questions, anywhere from like how to create different types of maps, so like cartography questions, to how to get different types of data, so data gathering questions, to like analysis questions, whether it's finding the best statistical methods or different coding languages, R, JavaScript, Google Earth Engine, for example, looking at remotely sensed data or different GIS workflows. So I got the chance to work with anywhere from like undergraduates to PhDs to postdocs to different like even research staff that has come with different questions, and I helped them bit by bit with their projects and trying to move research forward. So it's been a great experience being part of the Spatial Analysis Center and getting to work with the Stanford community to the extent that I've gotten to do it.
Wow, it seems like a great resource with diverse services. So, tell us about GIS and remote sensing. How would you explain what those are to someone who's unfamiliar with them? And also tell us why they are such powerful tools today, especially in the context of environmental and climate change.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I guess everything that happens in geographic space. So all the phenomena around us, it all has a spatial component, anywhere from like land cover change to, biodiversity loss to urban planning, development, infrastructure, renewable energy siting. Everything around us happens in space, in geographic space. So how do we understand both the natural as well as the man-made, so the anthropogenic processes that are happening around us and have shaped the world we live in. How do we get all this data, get all this information, combine it in a way in which it tells a story, and we can look and understand spatial patterns, spatial trends, as well as temporal patterns and temporal trends, understand how things happen over time and how humans have basically shaped the world that they live in. So that's why I think GIS and the power of GIS is pretty, I guess, extraordinary. And I've been going to a GIS conference every summer, and it's coming up in exactly 2 weeks at the Esri conference in San Diego. And I constantly am amazed by how fast the speed is evolving and the new developments in the field, looking at new data sources, new tools that can work with different types of data, or like analyzing the different data in different ways. So it's also really great to kind of see how the field has been evolving and really feel that I'm at the cutting edge of, spatial data science. Also with remote sensing, you get to look at satellite data. So you get to like understand changes on the Earth's surface by looking at an array of different types of data sets, anywhere from like data that comes back from decades ago to see how processes have evolved over time and the impacts that humans have on coastal areas, for example, or look at like really high resolution, like areas, for example, study flooding in your neighborhood and study things that we can do to mitigate and minimize the impact of flooding on different communities and highlight what areas are impacted more than others. So with remote sensing, you can really do a lot and kind of like understand how to direct resources in areas that are most vulnerable in a most effective way. So I hope that answers the question, but this is a very, very big question. I could talk about it for a very long time because, GIS and remote sensing are just one of my favorite, things to talk about. So,
Yeah, they both seem like very complex tools and sources, but very important ones too.
yeah, and I guess the last thing I would say, especially from, if people that are listening are from like the younger generation, so just starting in their academic journey, what I would say is with GIS and just geographic information system, just spatial data science, it's really a field of the future, and you can apply it to so many different things, anywhere from transportation to healthcare to access to grocery stores or access to healthcare to natural resource management, like managing fisheries, to conservation, like establishing, protected areas. So even if someone is interested in business, for example, they can use GIS to map supply chains, or if somebody's interested to be an engineer. Actually, I'm working with a lot of people that are earning engineering degrees, and they can look at how to build buildings that are more sustainable and how to make cities more, easily accessible and with transportation that is, green and renewable energy sources. So I guess all that to say is that, GIS and mapping and analyzing this type of data, you can really apply it to so many different fields.
Yeah, that is definitely true. Thank you for sharing. So, your research focuses on natural changes or how anthropogenic activities like construction, urban development, or farming affect coastal areas. So, can you share an example of how mapping tools or satellite images helped you see the impact of these human caused actions on the environment?
Yes. So I guess another great question. I've been working on multiple different projects, but the two projects that come to mind are basically looking at quantifying the benefit of nature-based solutions. So, for example, wetland restoration, and how if you can restore a wetland area upstream, it can mitigate flooding downstream. So that wetland is going to just absorb a lot of the rainwater under different rainfall scenarios, anywhere from like a usual type of storm to like a very, very extreme type of storm. It can absorb water, and then downstream in the watershed, the communities are going to be less impacted. So we can build different scenarios. We can build counterfactual scenario simulations in which we can come up with a clear kind of conclusion to quantify the benefits of different actions, different management actions. So that's a great example in which I could actually see, okay, if this area gets restored to a wetland area, it can actually benefit so many people, so many different communities in terms of, the array of different benefits that wetland has. And one of them is mitigating flooding. Another example that comes to mind is co-locating coastal hazards. So I really enjoy working at the intersection of the land and the water in the coastal region. I was fortunate enough to live on coastal areas in the past 16 years. And co-locating coastal hazards, so seeing where multiple hazards converge, I think it's very important type of information that can guide not only policy decisions, but also, people can make decisions in terms of where they want to live. If they want to live in an area that is further away from potential sea level rise, for example, or potential saltwater intrusion, which is a phenomenon in which salt water kind of goes into freshwater sources along the coast and contaminates them. Also storm surge. Sadly, we've been experiencing more and more active hurricane seasons and more storms year after year. So knowing what areas are likely to experience significant storm surge is also like a key piece of information that can guide day-to-day decisions from where you want to live to where you want to make sure that you try and protect those areas as best as possible, given that, they're very vulnerable.
Wow, mapping and satellite images can certainly have a lot of implications. So, you said that mapping lets you play with color and creativity. So, how does creativity intersect with science in GIS, and how do you bring that into your classroom?
Yeah, so another really, really great question, honestly. So I love painting. I used to paint when I was younger. And I haven't painted lately, but there was a time where I used to paint quite a bit. And I think it's really important to think about ways in which you can communicate science and communicate information effectively to different audiences. So definitely knowing the audience that you're trying to, reach, knowing who you're talking to is very, very important. And making sure that the elements that you create from a visual perspective, they're appealing and they're also tailored to like colorblind people, for example. So you don't use colors that some people might find confusing or not easy to understand. And also making sure that the information presented is clear and as, best visually appealing manner as possible. So I think science communication is definitely one of my passions, and just GIS and allowing, all this type of visualizations everywhere from like 2D maps to like 3D maps, for example. So showing the world in 3D and communicating that way has really allowed me to explore, different mediums and different ways to showcase information and kind of like see what kind of catches people's attention and what kind of makes them stop in their journey and like take another second to look at the poster or look at the map or look at the visual and like trying to understand and actually be interested in the topic that is being talked about. So I guess one thing that I really like to play around with colors and different kind of visual cues is just to catch people's interest, because you can do really great research, you can be outstanding in your field, but if the way you communicate your findings and your research, if it doesn't catch people's attention, then, how much of an impact do you really have? So I think that's a very important piece of the puzzle in terms of how you showcase the results of your research.
That's great to hear, and I think that's very, very important as well. Many people think maps are just technical tools, but as you were describing them, you think that they are a form of visual storytelling. So, how do you think maps can help us better understand the world, inspire action, and truly help people by influencing policy and driving change at the community level?
Yes, so definitely maps can do a lot of things. And if you think about historically, people have always kind of like drawn maps and trying to draw the world around them. Anywhere from like back in the days when you see like old drawings in caves to like, fast forward when people were just exploring the world and the first maps were ever created and sketched and built. So I think, historically people have tried to use this, maps as a form of visual storytelling. And I think right now, more than ever, given, everything that's going on in the world, it's very, very important to understand the processes that are happening and basically analyze them and display them and visualize them in different ways through maps and to different types of maps. I mentioned the Esri conference earlier. They built a whole suite of platforms and apps and widgets, and one of them is basically a story map function in which you can tell a story through incorporating different elements such as static maps, dynamic maps, charts, graphs, images, text, video. So all this type of information can be aggregated into one kind of story map to really tell a compelling story and basically like help people understand different processes regardless of what they're trying to study. So I think, it's very important now more than ever to really look at spatial data and think about creating effective visualizations and disseminating information.
Yeah, and I think story maps are powerful communication tools as well, like you said. Um, GIS is being used in so many fields beyond climate and environment. And so what are some areas or surprising areas that you found where GIS is making an impact, and can you also share how it's making an impact?
Yes, so that's absolutely right. In so many different areas, so many different fields. Um, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is just like urban planning. I work with a lot of students that are focused on transportation, are focused on, improving existing like city planning schemes, improving transportation, moving to like more bike lanes or more like, cars that don't pollute as much or making public transport more accessible. So trying to think about ways in which we can build sustainable cities. So moving past, necessarily like the conservation side, but also like how we can use GIS to improve the quality of life, to improve the urban environment, to make it so that we pollute less, to make it so that our transit is more efficient, and to make it so that, everyone has access to green space, for example, or everyone has access to grocery stores. So kind of like adopting the lens of equity and kind of like access and seeing what areas have more access, what areas have less access, why that might be, and what we can do to kind of make it that everyone lives in, a nice environment and can enjoy, living in a beautiful place in a beautiful city. So I guess thinking about using spatial data in a more like environmental justice perspective, I think that's very, very critical and very important, and definitely something that has been growing in the past couple of years. That maybe 10, 15 years ago it wasn't necessarily a thing that people would use GIS for, but nowadays you can really look at different socioeconomic demographic data and kind of like use that to drive policy, drive investment, and kind of like guide sustainable development projects.
Wow, that's so cool. So, what are some of the student projects that you've seen that really demonstrate how spatial analysis can be used to make a real world impact in communities or in regions?
So this is a very great question with so many different answers. I've had the immense opportunity to work on so many amazing projects. Very, very, very hard to choose one, but I might choose a couple. The first thing that comes to mind is mapping recycling facilities in Montana. So Montana, the student was from Montana, and they would grow up having to drive very long distances to reach a recycling facility to be able to recycle their cardboard, their glass, their like aluminum cans. They would drive up to an hour to drop off their recyclables. And then that begs the question, like, how are people living in Montana? How do they have access to these facilities? Where can new facilities be sited to where the majority of people could benefit from access to recyclables? Here in the Bay Area, we kind of take it for granted because there's always, a recyclable like way to like dispose of your waste, whereas in other places there's no such options. So what the student did, they basically created a new piece of data by geolocating and georeferencing existing facilities. So basically creating a new database with existing facilities, mapping those, and then seeing how many people live within a 15-minute drive. So doing some type of transportation metric in which they would quantify, X amount of people live within a 10-minute drive of this facility, but then how many people live outside of this? So how many people don't have access to this? So I thought that was very creative, very cool, very impactful. So that type of, research findings can be shown to city councils, to, people like in the state government that might want to see where new facilities could be located, where the majority of people would benefit from that. So that's one example. I guess another example that comes to mind that I was working with recently is mapping aquaculture and mapping the change in aquaculture. So there's been areas that have had a big boom in aquaculture, but then with time that has shifted. So trying to investigate what are causes in like either the increase or decrease in aquaculture in specific regions, and trying to use fine resolution satellite data to identify aquaculture sites. So that was also really important that, you can relate that to like fisheries and trying to improve management of fisheries and trying to see, how we can improve land management to basically have less of an impact in coastal areas as well.
Wow, that's so cool. And I think there are two perfect examples of how to use GIS to solve the climate problems that we so urgently need to solve. So, what is some advice that you would give to Gen Z who are interested in getting involved in solving the climate crisis?
Advice. So I guess thinking about this, the climate crisis can seem very, very difficult, a big problem to tackle. So I guess the best advice is to start local and start by, your day-to-day life and your day-to-day actions and decisions that you make on a daily basis, and know that they do matter. Individual choices do matter, and individual choices can lead to collective change. And if collective change happens, then, the big kind of scary problems get tackled and get solved bit by bit. It's definitely not easy, but I guess a lot of people are currently working on this. There's a lot of effort, there's a lot of innovation that is happening right now to try and address some of the pressing climate challenges that the world is facing. So I guess also know that, their efforts are not, solitary, that there's a lot of people working to solve the same problems, and just know that their day-to-day actions do make a difference in terms of the choices that they make.
Wow, thanks for sharing.
Yep.
Um, Finally, what's the best piece of career advice you've ever received that you would like to pass on to our audience listening today?
Best piece of career advice. I guess do something that you're passionate about, do something that you're interested in, do something that you're curious to learn more about. Because if you do something that you're really passionate about, it doesn't really feel like work. It doesn't feel like, oh my God, I have to do this and I really don't want to, and I'm trying to procrastinate, or I'm looking at the clock and can't wait to get out and do something else. So just, I guess, choose a career path that you're genuinely passionate about. And, it's fine if you don't know what that is. You can explore different things and then you can find out things that you're really passionate about. When I first started my college degree, I had no idea what I wanted to pursue. I had no idea what I wanted to study. I just took an oceanography class and I loved it so much that I was like, wow, like I love the ocean. I want to learn more about it. I want to learn about how the tides and currents work, how the waves work. I want to learn about corals and marine life because I thought it was fascinating. So that kind of brought me to marine science, and then, GIS, and then coastal research ultimately. So the best piece of advice is just take some time to explore and then do something that you're truly passionate about, something that you believe in. And that's going to make the world of a difference because it's going to make it fun and you're going to feel like you're making a difference rather than making it like a day-to-day kind of routine that you just have to do because there's no other option.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. It definitely seems like you're passionate about what you're doing at the Spatial Analysis Center.
Yep.
And with that, our interview comes to an end. And thank you so much for being here once again. And we loved having you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been great, and I hope to motivate the next generation of spatial data scientists.